notable performances on this night. Joe Milton III, we talked about, had to leave the game with an injury late in the fourth quarter. Stetson Bennett, game of his life as a pro, 16-24, couple of touchdown passes, and Blake Corum, as we mentioned, 2 touchdowns, only 9 rushing yards, but he scored twice. And that matters, even if it's just a preseason game. Garrett Pennell covers the Cowboys for CBS Sports. He joins us now from SoFi Stadium. Let's talk about the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. And Dak Prescott, obviously not in the game. So it's Joe Milton III. They picked this guy up. We know he's got a big arm. What'd you and the coaching staff make of his performance?
Hey, Russ, great to join you here. And I would say kind of a mixed bag is how I and myself and Brian Schottenheimer would describe this performance. Earlier this week, Brian Schottenheimer said Joe Milton's arm strength was comparable to Brett Favre. Schottenheimer was Favre's offensive coordinator in 2008 with the New York Jets, so he has seen Favre's arm up close. But he said to me tonight, Joe Milton probably could have used a little more of the changeup mixed in there with the fastball. Early on, Brian Schottenheimer called 6 consecutive passes to get Milton going in this game. He said he didn't mean to call 6 in a row, but he did want to get Milton in a rhythm, and he didn't really settle down until late in the first half when he connected with Jalen Brooks a few times. But the big takeaway here is for Milton just to play. I mean, he only played in 1 game last season. It was his Week 18 start against the Buffalo Bills. And so Schottenheimer told me, look, want him to get the check down a little more. On the interception, he threw deep to the end zone to Ryan Flanoy. He said that's a play in which Joe puts a lot of trust in Flanoy, but upon reviewing the film, he probably would coach him to take the check down there because he had to evade the pass rush and kind of step up and then throw it versus throwing from a clean pocket. But he did like the way Milton bounced back and hit undrafted tight end Rivaldo Mayweather in the back of the end zone there for the touchdown. And then in terms of the elbow, right, we saw he did leave at the very end. Schottenheimer told me he didn't think it was serious. I spoke to Milton also in the postgame locker room, and he said he's, quote, pretty fine and will probably be all good. What other players stood out in a positive way for head coach Brian Schottenheimer? We also had 7th-round rookie Phil Maffa. He was the team's leading rusher out of Clemson. He was a bruiser, and his last year at Clemson, the reason he fell into the 7th round, he was playing with a torn labrum in his shoulder. Entering this game, he said that labrum's fully healed. He feels ready to go. He had 14 yards really quickly on his first 3 carries. They liked what they saw from him tonight. And then an undrafted rookie, Trayshawn Holden out of Oregon. He was inserted into the game midway through the fourth quarter. Didn't play a ton. Finished with 2 catches for 42 yards to lead the team. And most of that came on his second catch of the day, a 35-yarder down the right sideline in a play in which he snuck behind the zone defense and Milton rifled it in there to Holden. And that was a play that Brian Schottenheimer told me will move him up the depth chart and get him more looks the rest of this preseason. CeeDee Lamb didn't play, but he made the highlight for all the wrong reasons. How the heck did he get run over by an official? How does that even happen, Garrett? That's a phenomenal question, Russ. And I guess the simple answer, right, would be when the offense is on the field for the Dallas Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb typically isn't on the sideline. But Brian Schottenheimer told me when asked about CeeDee Lamb post-game that, you know, I'm going to file that under need to be better with discipline. The Cowboys as a team had 11 penalties. That's something he wants to tighten up. In the joint practice against the Rams, illegal formation was definitely a penalty that came up on that Tuesday, and they had consecutive illegal formation penalties on their first really long drive of the first half that resulted in a 35-yard Brandon Aubrey field goal. So some things to tighten up, but they filed the CeeDee Lamb thing under need to be better with the discipline. And Lamb in the locker room told the Dallas Morning News that there's a simple answer to it, and it'll get cleaned up. All right, yeah, he'll put on a helmet and pads and get out on the field where he's used to playing. Unfamiliar territory there. Look, both Stephen and Jerry Jones commented on team-owned radio on this day about Micah Parsons. It's been the talk about everybody. The truth is they didn't say a whole lot. What is the latest on Micah Parsons? I mean, the latest on Micah Parsons is what they said to me on Tuesday after the joint practice, which is they view Micah Parsons' trade request as a negotiation ploy. That's what Jerry Jones said on Tuesday. Today on the team radio station pregame, Stephen Jones said, quote, "We have no intention of trading Micah Parsons." So they are fully dug in on figuring a way to negotiate a long-term contract with Parsons. Parsons clearly requested the trade because he felt negotiations became personal here. He didn't appreciate in his multi-screenshot request on Twitter about asking for a trade that they criticized his durability by saying, Jerry said the opening press conference of training camp, he missed 6 games. Well, he only missed 4 with an ankle sprain, and that really rubbed Parsons the wrong way. So there's definitely, some counseling that needs to happen between the two sides for them to come back together. And I believe that Jerry Jones needs to be the one to pick up the phone and make that call, because when I spoke to Dak Prescott about these negotiations earlier this week, he said what helped him come to terms on his second big contract with the Cowboys, it was Steven and Jerry Jones calling him and asking him to talk man to man. So that needs to happen here. Still, both sides have not had direct conversations since Micah requested that trade last Friday.
Perhaps negotiating practices going on both sides here. We'll see if they can finally come together at some point. Garrett Puddell, thanks so much. Much appreciated. Safe travels back to Big D from L.A. And here's a look at the highest paid edge rushers by average annual value. You would say by this list, T.J. Watt, of course, the highest paid of all, the most recent recipient of a massive contract, $42 million a year. Seems about the going rate for Micah Parsons.
Cowboys Nation, you might want to sit down for this one, because what I'm about to say might sound insane at first. But imagine this: CeeDee Lamb lining up on one side, Brandon Cooks stretching the field on the other, and in the slot, Tyreek freaking Hill. Yeah, I said it. There's a wild prediction out there that Miami could actually move on from the Cheetah. And guess who could swoop in? That's right, our Dallas Cowboys. Now, before you say, Victor, you've lost your mind, hear me out, because the numbers, the situation in Miami, and the window we have in Dallas all line up for this to be more than just a fantasy. So here's the deal. The Dolphins are in a weird spot right now. A couple years ago, people were calling them a Super Bowl contender. Mike McDaniel's offense was hot, Tua was healthy, and Tyreek Hill looked unstoppable. But fast forward to now, and defenses have adjusted, Tua's had injury issues, and Miami's not looking like a top-tier threat anymore. Hill's contract runs out in 2026, and Miami could move him now while his value is still sky high. And even with a bit of a drop in production last year, 81 catches, 959 yards, 6 touchdowns, the guy is still one of the most explosive weapons in football. Remember, in 2023, he had a ridiculous 1,799 yards and 13 touchdowns. That's not just Pro Bowl stuff, that's all pro, game-breaking, defensive nightmare type of production. Now you might be thinking, why would Dallas even consider this? 2 words: championship window. Dak Prescott is playing the best football of his career. Our defense is stacked with Micah Parsons and Trevin Diggs, and the NFC is wide open outside of maybe the Eagles and 49ers. You add Tyreek Hill to an offense with CeeDee Lamb, who, by the way, just had 135 receptions for 1,749 yards and 12 touchdowns. And suddenly, you're talking about the scariest wide receiver duo in the entire league. Defenses wouldn't be able to double Lamb, safeties would be forced deep every snap, and Tony Pollard, or whoever's in the backfield, is running against light boxes all day long. Look, I'm not saying it's perfect. Tyreek's 31 years old, he's not cheap, and you'd have to give up premium draft capital to get him. But ask yourself this, Cowboys Nation, when was the last time we went truly all in to win a Super Bowl? Jerry Jones has been talking about making bold moves for years. Well, this is bold. And don't forget, Mike McCarthy runs a system that thrives on yards after the catch. Tyreek is literally built for that. Imagine those quick slants turning into 60-yard house calls. Imagine motioning him into the backfield like Deebo Samuel and just letting chaos happen. The fit is almost too good. So here's the big question for y'all. Would you pull the trigger? Would you give up, say, a first-round pick and maybe a third for a 2-year shot with Tyreek Hill in Dallas? Or do you think we're better off rolling with what we have and saving the picks for the future? Because I'll be honest, I can't stop picturing Dak throwing a 40-yard bomb and Tyreek just gliding past 2 defenders in the playoffs, and AT&T Stadium going absolutely insane. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And remember, the Eagles made their A.J. Brown move. The 49ers went and got Christian McCaffrey. Maybe it's time we make ours. Alright, Cowboys Nation, that's all for today. But if this Tyreek Hill rumor heats up even a little bit, you know I'll be here breaking it down for you. Make sure you subscribe, hit that like button if you want to see the cheetah and a star on his helmet, and I'll catch you in the next one. Let's go, Cowboys!